History tells us the first Catholic Mass takes place in the Philippines, marked the beginning of Christianity in the country.
But historians still argue about where it truly happened. Is it really happened in Limasawa or Butuan? A pleasant morning to you, our dearest classmates, and especially to our course professor, Sir Noel. Good morning. I am Nadine Tamor Hamarawan from BSED Major in English 1, and here's my partner, Miss Nika Porake from BSED Social Studies 1, and we are the reporter of Case Study 1, Where did the first Catholic Mass takes place in the Philippines? Many people are interested in knowing where the firsts in history happened, such as the first Catholic Mass in the Philippines. For more than 300 years, it was widely believed that this event took place in Butuan, and a monument was even built there in 1872 near the Agusan River. However, historians later discovered that this belief was based on a simple and incomplete reading of historical sources. Because of this, scholars began to re-examine the available evidences more carefully, leading to a debate: did the first mass really happen in Butuan, or was it actually in Limasawa? To answer these questions, historians rely on two important primary sources written by eyewitnesses of the expedition of Ferdinand Magellan. These are the log of Francisco Albo and the detailed account of Antonio Pigafetta. These sources are considered reliable because they were written by people who personally experienced the journey in 1521, making them strong historical evidence.
The first time Magellan's expedition saw land that was part of the Philippines, they were sailing west from Ladrones Islands, now the Mariana Islands. So they noticed that land to the northwest, but the sea around it mainly had shallow areas, which were dangerous for large ships because of this they decided to sail close that to the island. Later they learned that islands was called Yunagan. They were sent instead that same day toward southwards to another small islands named Suluan. And there they anchored. They saw some canoes, but this flood, at the Spaniards' approach, the island was not two-thirds degrees north latitude. Instead of approaching the first island, the expedition sailed south and reached another small islands called Suluan. They anchored their ships there, meaning they stopped and secured the ship in the water. The explorers saw local people in the small boats, so the name is canoes or canoes. But when the locals saw the Spaniards approaching, they quickly left. They show that the local people were cautious or are afraid of the foreign ships. It is a record of the island's latitude, showing how carefully the navigators tracked their location. Rule number 3, departing from those two islands, they sailed westward to inhabited the islands of Gada, where they took in a supply of wood and water. They see around that islands was free from shallows. Albos does not give the latitude of these islands, but from Figafetta's testimony, this seems to be the Aquada or Hamunhon at 10 degrees north latitude. So after leaving the first two islands, the expedition sailed west to another island called Gada. This island was uninhabited, meaning no people lived there. So they sailors stopped there to collect wood and fresh water, which were essential for supply to for long sea and voyage. The sea around the island was deep and safe for ships, Unlike the earlier islands with shallow waters, historians believe that these islands was actually Hamonon Islands, based on the account of Antonio Fegafetta, another member of Magellan's expedition. These islands became important because it was one of the places or first places where Magellan's crew stayed after reaching the Philippines. These entries describe the route of Magellan's expedition when they first reached the Philippine Islands in 1521. The logbooks record is the first sight of island, their movement between islands, their search for safe harbors and supplies. Because of the record was written by Francisco Albo himself, it is considered the primary historical source helping historian understand how exactly the expedition arrived in the Philippines. So for number 4, from that islands they sailed westward towards a large island named Shilani or Sailani that was inhabited and was known to have gold. Sailani or Figafetes call it Ceylon was the island of Leyte. After leaving the previous islands, the expedition sailed west to bigger islands called Ceylani. According to historian, this island refers to Leyte. The island was inhabited, meaning people already lived there. It was also believed have a gold and which attracted to Spaniards because European explorers were searching for valuable resources during their voyage. It shows how explorers were not only navigating but also looking for wealth and trade opportunities. So let's proceed to number 5. Sailing southwards along the coast of that large island, Shilani, they turned southwest to a small island called Mazava. That island is also a latitude of 9 and 2/3 degree north. The expedition continued sailing along the coast of Leyte and then changed direction towards a small island called Mazava, so which historians identify as Limasawa. The navigator recorded the exact latitude, showing how carefully they tracked their position. Recording coordinates was important for navigation so that the future of sailors could follow for the same route. The islands later became historically important because it is connected to the first Christian mosque in the Philippines. So in number 6, the people of the islands Mazaba was very good. There, the Spaniards planted a cross upon a mountain top. From they were shown 3 islands to the west and southwest, where they were told there was a much gold. They showed us how the gold was gathered, which named in small pieces and like peas and lentes, which the Spaniards arrived in Limasawa. They met friendly local people. The local was very good, meaning they were welcoming and cooperative. The Spaniards placed a cross on the top of the mountain, which symbolized the spread of Christianity, claiming of the land for Spanish, and the locals also told the explorers about how nearby islands that had gold and even showed them how gold was collected in small pieces. This information made the Spaniards for interested in exploring other nearby islands. So for number 7, from Mazabas, they sailed northwards, Sailani. They followed the coast of Sailani in a westerly direction. Ascending up to 10 degrees of latitude, they were saw 3 small islands. After staying in Limasawa, the expedition sailed towards Leyte again. They followed coastline and continued traveling a northwest direction. While sailing, they reached about 10 degrees north latitude and saw three small islands. It mainly describes that their navigation route and show how explorers carefully documented the islands they passed. For number 8, from there sailed westward some thin legs are and they were saw three islets where they drop anchor for the night. In the morning they sailed southwest some three legs down to a latitude 10 and one-third degree. They entered a channel between two islands, one of which called Mathan and the other is Sobo. The ships continued sailing west and three small islands, where they stopped and anchored for the night. The next morning, they continued sailing southwest and eventually passed through a channel between two islands. The Mactan, called the Mathan, are in the text is Cebu called Subu. It shows how the expedition reached Cebu, and which became a major location in Magellan's journey. And the paragraph 9 or the number 9 is they sailed down the channel and then turned westward and anchored at the town of La Villa or Subu, which there stayed many days of obtained provisions and entered into peace pact with local king. After entering the channel, the ships reached the town of Cebu. They stayed and therefore for many days too, like to gather foods and supplies, prepare their ships. They also made a peace of agreement with the local ruler, which helped them establish friendly relations with people of Cebu. This interaction later led to major historical events involving local leaders like Raha Humabon. In paragraph number 10, the town of Cebu was on the east-west direction of the islands of Suluan and Mazava. But between Mazava and Cebu, there were no many shallows that boats could not go to westward directly but has to go as they did in a roundabout way. So it explains the geography and sea conditions around Cebu. Although Cebu was located west of the earlier islands like Suluan and Limasawa, the ships could not sail which directly. The reason was the sea between those islands had many shallow areas and which were dangerous for ships. Because of this, expedition had to take a longer indirectly to route to reach the Cebu safety.
For this case study, I will discuss the testimony of Antonio Pigafetta and how his account helps historians determine the location of the first Catholic Mass in the Philippines. Antonio Pigafetta was an Italian scholar and explorer who joined Ferdinand Magellan's expedition around the world. He was an eyewitness to many important events during the voyage, including the first Catholic Mass. Because he personally witnessed these events and carefully recorded them in his journal. His account is considered one of the most valuable primary sources in the Philippine history. According to Pigafetta, Magellan's expedition first sighted land on March 16, 1521. The following day, March 17, they landed on the inhabited island of Comonhon, which is located at about 10 degrees north latitude. The expedition stayed there for 8 days to rest, recover from their long voyage, and obtain food and water supplies. On March 25, they left Homonhon and sailed west-southwest. Pigafetta carefully described the route they followed, passing several islands before reaching an island called Mazawa. He specifically stated that Mazawa was located at approximately 9 and 2/3 degrees north latitude and was about 25 leagues from Homonhon. The expedition arrived in Misawa on March 28, which was Holy Thursday. There, Magellan and his men were welcomed by the local ruler. Pigafetta described how gifts were exchanged and friendly relations were established between the Spaniards and the local people. One of the most important events recorded by Pigafetta happened on March 31, 1521, which was the Easter Sunday. Early that morning, Magellan sent men ashore to prepare for the Mass. Later, a Catholic Mass was celebrated with Magellan, his crew, and the local rulers in attendance. After the Mass, a cross was venerated, and in the afternoon, Magellan and his men planted a large cross on the highest hill of the island. Pigafetta also recorded that both the King of Mazawa and King of Butuan were present during the Mass and the planting of the cross. This detail is significant because it shows that Butuan and Limazawa or the Mazawa were separate places. If the Mass had taken place in Butuan itself, there would have been no reason to mention the king of Butuan as a visitor attending the event.
So, Figafetan, 7 days in Mazawa. Thursday, March 28, Holy Thursday, Magellan's fleet anchored near an island, meeting the natives and their king. After an exchange of gifts, they moved closer to shore near the king's village. This marks the initial contact between Ferdinand Magellan's expedition and the local inhabitants of the Mazawa, while widely identified as Limasawa. The exchange of gifts was a crucial diplomatic ritual known as kasi-kasi, the blood compact of brotherhood ritual, intended to establish peaceful intentions and mutual trust before the Europeans even step on the foot on the shore. So the diplomacy of the interpreter in Friday, March 21, next day, the Holy Friday. Magellan's interpreter requested food supplies and the native kings visited the Magellan ship, where another gift exchange took place. The two Spaniards, including Figafetta, and stayed as guests. So these nights highlight the role of Enrique of Malacca, Magellan's Malay interpreter. His ability to communicate with the locals of Eureka moment for the expedition. It is proof that they had reached the Far East. The fact of that the Fegafetta is chronicle stayed as a guest indicates a high level of hospitality and security, allowing him to document local customs firsthand. So the cultural immersion are in March 30, the Saturday, Figafetta and his companion feasted with the king before returning to the ships in the next morning. So this covers the social integration of the Spaniards. Feasting was more than just eating. It was a political and social ceremony. Figafetta used this time to observe the king's status, gold ornaments, and eating habits, which he later recorded in his journals. This rapport building was essential for the religious events planned for the following day. The first Mass and the future planning. In March 31, Easter Sunday, Magellan held a Mass, planted a cross on hill, and discussed the trade ports with the local kings, who suggested the Subo, or which means the Cebu, as the best option. So this is one of the most significant dates in the Philippines history, making the first Catholic Mass takes place in the Philippines, an archipelago. by planting a cross in the highest hill, and was not just performing a religious act but also claiming the territory for Spain. The mention of Zubo or Cebu shows that the local kings were part for a large trade network and guided as the Spaniard toward a more significant commercial club. On April 1 to 3, 1521, were delayed as the local king prioritized harvesting. So for now, let's proceed to the plans to travel to Cebu. April 1 to 3, 1521, plans to travel to Cebu were delayed as the local king prioritized harvesting. Magellan provided men to help, but work was delayed due to the king's drinking. So the period highlights the cultural negotiation between Magellan and the local ruler, the Raja Colombo of Mazawa. Magellan was eager to reach Cebu to find more provisions and trade, but the Rajas insisted on finishing the rice harvest first. So, in show of goodwill and to speed some things up, so Magellan actually sent some of his sailors to work in fields alongside the locals. So, however, history notes that work didn't go fast as Magellan's hoped because of the Raja spent a significant amount of time drinking with his guests. So which slowed down to labor. It is classical example of the island's time meeting European urgency. So in for April for 1521, Magellan and his fleet departed from Zawa, heading to Cebu. Once the harvest finally settled and the festivus are concluded, the fleet officially fold anchored. This was a pivotal moment because of the Raja of Mazawa was actually acted as pilot or guide for the Spaniards, leading them toward the much larger trading hub of Cebu. This journey would eventually led to the first mass conversations in Cebu, but also to the conflict of Mactan, which Magellan would lose his life.
Another important point raised by historians, especially Father Miguel Bernad, is that Pigafetta never mentioned the Agusan River. This is significant because Butuan is known as a river settlement located along the Agusan River. Since Pigafetta carefully described many geographical features throughout the voyage, it would be unusual for him to omit such a major landmark if the expedition had actually been in Butuan. After staying in Mazawa for 7 days, the expedition left on April 4 and sailed towards Cebu, guided by the king of Mazawa. Pigafetta once again provided detailed description of the route they followed, which matches the geographical location of present-day Limasawa Island in southern Leyte. Now, let us discuss the age of exploration and its connection to the arrival of Magellan's expedition here in the Philippines. So the age of exploration was a period in history when European countries competed to discover, conquer, and colonize lands outside the Europe. This period began during the 15th century and continued into the 7th century. The main reason behind this exploration was trade. Europeans highly valued Asian products such as spices, soap, porcelain, and other luxury goods. However, the existing trade routes to Asia were mostly overland and controlled by powerful middlemen, making products very expensive. Because of this, European rulers searched for alternative sea routes that would allow them to trade directly with Asia. Finding a direct sea route would reduce costs and increase profits. And among the countries involved in exploration were Portugal and Spain. Spain's major attempt to find a westward route to Asia was led by Christopher Columbus. Columbus believed that by sailing westward across the Atlantic Ocean, he could reach Asia faster. Instead, he accidentally reached the Americas, which were previously unknown to most Europeans at that time. And after Columbus' voyage, Spain became more active in exploration and colonization. During the 16th century, Spain successfully colonized many territories in North America, Mexico, and Southern America. Eventually, the Spanish expedition also reached the Philippines. And one of the most important expeditions sent by Spain was led by Ferdinand Magellan in 1519. Although Magellan was Portuguese, he sailed under the Spanish crown. His goal was to find a westward route to the Spice Island or Moluccas. In March 1521, Magellan's expedition arrived in the Philippines. During their stay, the first Catholic Mass was celebrated on March 31, 1521, on the island called Mazawa, now believed to be called Limasawa. This event marked the beginning of Christianity in the Philippines, and eventually led to the spread of Spanish influence throughout the archipelago. However, it is also important to mention that after Magellan's death in the Battle of Mactan, the remaining members of the expedition continued their journey. According to Antonio Pigafetta's later account, the survivors traveled to Mindanao and possibly reached Butuan. So in this later account, Pigafetta vividly described traveling along a river. Historians use this detail as evidence because Butuan is known as a riverine settlement located along the Agusan River. This is the important in the debate regarding the site of the first Catholic Mass. During Pigafetta's earlier description of Mazawa, he never mentioned a river. If Mazawa had truly been Butuan, historians argue that Pigafetta would likely have described the Agusan River because it is one of the area's most noticeable geographical features. Therefore, the age of exploration not only explains why Europeans came to the Philippines, but also provides historical context for understanding Magellan's voyage. The spread of Christianity and the debate between Butuan and Limasawa as the site of the first Catholic Mass.
For summary, in 1996, the first ever Christian Mass in the country, on March 31, 1521, was celebrated in the islands of Limasawa, south of Leyte and not in Butuan City. So declared the National Historical Institute. So after reviewing all the evidence, like Albo's log and Bernard's research, the National Historical Institute formally declared Limasawa as the true site of the 1521 Mass. So sa Limasawa talaga, not in Butuan City. It was officiated by the priest named Father Pedro Balderrama in the shore of Mazawas in Pigafetta's journal. Wong people believe in the town of specifically in the shore of Limasawa in southern Leyte. It is popularly known as the birthplace of the church in the Philippines. So this connects the historical log to the religious significance. Father Pedro Balderrama was the only priest on the expedition. This event is considered the birth of Christianity of the Philippines. turning Limasawa into a major historical and religious landmark. So again, the mass was celebrated in Limasawa, not in Butuan City. That's all. Thank you.